I shared with you all week before last that I don't just go to any car dealership. I don't just go to any car dealership. In fact, the past 2 cars that I've bought, there's a specific dealership that I like to go to. It's a local dealership known as the Priority Auto Group. Now, they have not paid me to for this marketing campaign or this free advertisement that I'm giving them. They probably don't even know that I'm a pastor. But I love Priority, not just because of their selection of cars, but I love them for this wonderful feature they have called Priorities for Life. For those of you who may not be from the area and those of you who may not be familiar with what that means, Priorities for Life consists of about 4 major components. With Priorities for Life, you get free oil and filter changes. Somebody say for life.
For life.
You get free state inspections. Somebody say for life.
For life.
Your parts and service are guaranteed. Somebody say for life.
For life.
And even, and this is a big one, your engine is guaranteed. Somebody say for life.
For life.
That sells itself.
Yes.
And so for that reason, I bought my first new car from them and got Priorities for Life. And then they really started showing off, and they extended it from just new cars to even used cars. So I even bought a used car with Priorities for Life. This seems strange. This seems weird. What sort of people would give these sort of benefits away? These Priorities for Life. Well, I'd like to suggest today that that's just not a feature of the Priority Auto Group, but I believe it's a feature of our God.
Amen.
That He gives us priorities that are necessary for life. And I'd even like to suggest that these scriptures that we've looked at this morning, these what we call the Decalogue or the 10 Commandments, are not just rules by which the children of Israel were to be punished for breaking. I'd like to suggest that they are what I'm calling today's sermon, Priorities for Life. Priorities for life. Priorities for life. In your house, if you're the person holding the smartphone or holding the remote controller, will you just look down your row of other congregants and say, the sermon is Priorities for Life?
Sermon is Priorities for Life.
Now, I've already given you just a few of these priorities, just to review part 1, because we're dealing with part 2 today. In part 1, I shared with you 3 things we should prioritize in our lives. For those of you who missed part 1, I'll just recall them for you. The first thing we should prioritize in our life is prioritize putting God first. We talked about the importance of having only one God, because God is incapable of being second. We put God first. Not only that, but we should prioritize not favoring gods that are formed by hand. This goes to the commandment where He says, you shall not have any idols. You shall not have graven, carved images for the sake of worshiping. We prioritize not favoring gods that are formed by hand. And lastly, the third one I gave you is that we prioritize not using God's name frivolously. In other words, if I could quote the great theologian Birdman, put some respect on God's name. And so today, if you're taking notes, I want to share with you 3 more things we should prioritize in our life. 3 more things we should prioritize in our life. Now, just to give you some context for the content, one of the things I shared with you, the book of Exodus consists of the children of Israel who have found themselves in a pretty vicarious situation. They have gone from a place of prominence when Joseph was the vice president of Egypt to now slaves in this land. They've gone from the top all the way down to the bottom, and things got so bad that they cried out to God. And not only did they cry out to God, but here's the good news, God heard them. And if that wasn't good enough news, God did not only hear them, God decided to do something about it. He says, I hear the cries of my people, and He calls a man by the name of Moses. He raises up Moses, who was literally born during a time where young Hebrew boys were being slaughtered by the masses. And He takes this Hebrew boy who's born in the midst of chaos, born in the midst of tribulation, born in the trenches, and He says, I'm going to use him to deliver His people who are in the same situation. Sounds like a Dr. Martin Luther King of his time. Moses led his people through troubled waters and into the promised land. And so these are slaves. These are people who've been oppressed. These are people who have been beat up. These are people who have made a nation rich while they grew poorer. These are the people who are about to walk into the promise that God has for them. But before they can walk into the promise, he gives them these 10 commandments. One of the things I shared during our Bible study is you find the 10 commandments in the Bible twice. You find it in Exodus for the first time, and then you find it in Deuteronomy as they're preparing to cross over. And so he gives them these 10 commandments. And again, I think for so long, because that word commandment is in there, we see it as a list of rules. And because we see it as a list of rules, we try to stay away from these. We say, the Lord has delivered us from the 10 commandments. We don't have to follow these 10 commandments. We don't have to memorize. Some of the saints don't even know all 10. These 10 commandments, because they seem like something heavy. They seem like a burden. But again, I argue today that these are not just rules by which they would be punished. These are priorities that were necessary for the promise he was giving them. You ready for some words this morning?
Amen.
The first thing we should prioritize, the first thing in this next set of priorities, is we should prioritize rest. I should shout right there.
Yes.
We should prioritize rest. If I had an organ, I would dance right now. We should prioritize rest. And the reason I'm saying, and the reason I'm excited, is because I am the victim of restlessness. I am a busy body. I do not sit still. I am always thinking about something, always working on something, always scheming on. I am always going. And here, God gives this commandment, or might I say blessing, that we are to rest. Somebody say rest.
Rest.
Rest. Rest. I promise it's not a cuss word, although it seems like it in the nation that we live in, where everybody's a mover and a shaker. If you're not doing something, then you are nothing. We literally place value on ourselves based on how much we can accomplish, how little we sleep, how little we eat, and how much we get done, how much wealth we generate for other people. Ain't that something? We do not like to rest, but we're in an environment that conditions us not to rest.
Amen.
Everything they market to us is to make us stronger, faster, to stay up longer. Some folks have to take sleeping pills just to go to sleep because there's so much caffeine in their system that's been keeping them up to get so much stuff done.
Yes.
So the first thing we need to prioritize, and might I even suggest that maybe God has made it a priority at this point by shutting everything down, is we need to rest.
Amen.
We should prioritize rest. Verse 8 says, remember the Sabbath, the seventh day, to keep it holy, set apart, dedicated to God. 6 days. Somebody say 6 days.
6 days.
Working 7 days is of the devil. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work. But the seventh day is a Sabbath, a day of rest dedicated to the Lord your God. On that day you shall not do any, somebody say any work.
Any work.
You or your son or your daughter, I just got convicted, or your male servant, or your female servant, or your livestock, your dog can't even do no work, or the temporary resident, the foreigner, which means our brothers and sisters from across the border can't do no work, who stays within your city gates. For in 6 days the Lord made the heavens and the earth, the sea and everything that is in them, and he rested. Somebody say rested.
Rested.
It literally says in the Amplified, he ceased on the seventh day. That is why the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and made it holy. That is set apart for his purpose. Some of you are saying, Pastor Mike, that makes sense. That makes sense. But why should we rest? It makes sense to me, but why really should we rest? I'm going to give you 2 good reasons, and I'm going to expound on them. 2 reasons we should prioritize rest. The first reason, we should prioritize rest for our health. That's enough to shout right there.
My God.
The second reason we need to prioritize rest, and I'm preaching to myself right now, we need to prioritize rest for holiness.
Amen.
Health and holiness. Let's tackle this thing. I found 7 scientifically proven benefits of taking a day of rest. I literally found this in an article on Inc.com. Write these down. 7 scientifically proven benefits of taking a day of rest. You ain't got no excuse after this. The first proven benefit, scientifically proven benefit of taking a day of rest is that a day of rest helps to reduce stress. A day of rest. Somebody say a day.
A day.
Not 8 hours of sleep. A day of rest. Somebody say 24 hours.
24 hours.
A day of rest helps to reduce stress. Might I suggest that the reason some of us are so stressed out is because we're constantly going. Our mind is constantly going. We go to bed thinking about bills, go to sleep thinking about bills, and wake up again thinking about bills. We're constantly going, and they've done scientific research. They've tested people, and they've suggested that people who take one day of rest, just one day a week, one day of rest, their lives are significantly improved because their stress levels have reduced. The second benefit is a day of rest, and these go hand in hand, reduces inflammation and the risk of heart disease. So again, because I'm not stressing as much, because I took a day of rest, now my body's not inflamed, and I'm actually combating heart disease. Amen. The third reason, a day of rest actually boosts your immune system. There's a great irony here. So watch this. If I would use a sick day, I might not need a sick day. That's a revelation right there. Literally, a day of rest will actually boost your immune. You are less likely to get sick if you are resting. 4, a day of rest increases our productivity. Now, this is like a catch-22, an oxymoron, because we're conditioned in society to believe that the more you get done, the more you do and the less you rest, the more productive you are. But scientific research actually suggests that by taking a day of rest, you'll be more productive than if you worked 7 days. See, here's the problem. We do a lot of stuff good, but we don't do anything great because we're too tired. But if we take a day of rest, then we can do a lot of great instead of just a whole lot of good. 5, a day of rest boosts your creativity. So you will be more creative if you take a full day of rest. The reason some of you are struggling to write that book, because you ain't resting. The reason you're struggling to write that business plan out, you ain't resting. The reason you're struggling with that invention that God placed in your heart, you ain't resting. And so because your mind is so used to going and it doesn't have a time to unwind and bring in whatever God is trying to download in your spirit, because it's so filled with all the cares of this world, you're not creative. It boosts creativity. A day of rest, help me Holy Ghost, improve short-term memory.
Lord have mercy, Jesus.
Bishop, we about to get delivered.
Yes.
It boosts short-term memory. My wife should be shouting right now because there's some stuff she'll tell me and I be done let it go and forgot about it. And it's because I'm so busy. And so we'd be better husbands. We'd be better wives. We'd be better parents if we took a day of rest. We could remember things. Our mind has time. I read in an article that when we sleep, the mind is actually repairing connections in the brain, which helps with the short and long-term memory. So a day of rest gives the mind time to catch up with all the mayhem you've put it through. And last but not least, I'm about to set somebody free. A day of rest actually helps us to enjoy our jobs more.
Wow.
Have mercy.
Your job really ain't all that bad. You just don't like it because you're there so much. If you would just take a day, you wouldn't drag into the office on Monday morning. You would skip into the office on Monday morning. Some of us have left great jobs, not because the job was too much, but just we would not rest. And we worked ourselves to the bone. I'm so glad the company that I work for, I ain't even gonna throw their name out there, they sent a company email that thanked us for the way we handled the pandemic. They were like, listen, call volume was up. Y'all were making sure that the database was working and troubleshooting, running reports, whatever y'all had to do. They said, listen, we're announcing now our first ever whiteout period. Now, if you're familiar with a blackout period, you know that a blackout period is a time where you can't take time off. And we have been in a blackout period for a while. But the VP of my department sent an email and said, listen, we're going to have a whiteout. We are encouraging you to take some days off. We are encouraging you to take some vacation. We are encouraging you to take some PTO. Matter of fact, call in sick tomorrow. We are encouraging you to take some time off. Because my company recognizes that if they want to continue to get the best out of us, we have to rest. That's a catchy little phrase right there. If you want your best, you gotta rest. If you want your best, you gotta rest. Listen, I want to apologize publicly right now as your pastor because I've been so tired. You have not been getting the best me. But from this day forward, and I know my wife gonna keep me accountable, I am going to get me some rest.
Amen. Because
God called me to be the best, not just for him, but also for you.
Amen.
7 scientifically proven benefits. There are health benefits to getting some rest. I'm going to get in trouble for this one. But my Android phone, no shade to you iPhone users, tends to always have battery. My wife's iPhone tends to always be dead. And I bless God for the Holy Spirit. Because I think he moved on her recently. At first, she wouldn't admit that her phone was always dead, but the words came out her mouth recently. She said, Lord, my phone is always dead. And I wanted to run. Thank you, Jesus. She's coming to the truth. But why is important? See, it's not that my wife's phone doesn't have a great battery. I've discovered by picking her phone up a couple times that my wife leaves a lot of apps open to run in the background. And so even when she's not using her phone is still being used. I just convicted about 500,000 iPhone users. And so because her phone is always open, it's constantly being drained. Might I suggest that some of us are like my wife's iPhone? We have left ourselves so open. We have left ourselves open for requests. We've left ourselves open for favors. We've left ourselves open for overtime. We've left ourselves open, and we're so open that we're becoming drained.
Yes.
I gotta close some apps.
What's that?
And this is what the Sabbath allows you to do. It allows us an opportunity to close some of the openings. I'm not answering my phone today. I can't help you. I'm not responding to your text message today. I can't help you. No, I did not get the company email on overtime. I won't be there. It allows us the time to close some apps. But not only that, I discovered something else. When I picked up my wife's iPhone, my wife is signed in to a whole bunch of apps. She big mad right now, but that's okay. She is signed into a whole lot of apps. And one of the things I did a couple years ago is I started signing out of my social media accounts. I'm going to tell you why. Because I realized that every time my phone would go off, I would pick my phone up. And so it would interrupt me from what I needed to be doing, even if what I was doing was nothing. And so because we're so signed into everything, watch this, I'm simply waiting on the next interruption. Wow. And the reason some of us are not resting is because we're just like my wife's iPhone. We're simply waiting for the next interruption. We're waiting. Oh, she big mad right now. That's okay. We are waiting for the next interruption. We waiting for the next cup of tea. We waiting on the next breaking headline. We waiting on the next big thing on Netflix. We waiting on interrupt. We're not even sleeping good at night because we're simply waiting on the next interruption. Lord, she gonna get me after church. Brother Sean, you gotta play security, man. We should prioritize rest. Yes. We should prioritize rest. Why? Because it's for our health. But not only that, we should prioritize rest because when we don't prioritize rest, it takes away from our holiness. I know that sounds weird, but I'm going to break it down. He says, remember the Sabbath day, King James says it, and keep it holy.
Amen.
We think that means go to church.
Yeah.
No. Resting is being holy. Might I suggest that some of us are one thing away from perfect holiness? We go to church. We got a good prayer life. We even fast when the church calls a fast, but we don't rest. And here's why that plays into our holiness. I'm going to help you out. A Sabbath rest is a subtle reminder that the world does not revolve around us, nor does it stop revolving without us. I'm going to say it again so you can write it down. A Sabbath rest is a subtle reminder that the world does not revolve around us, nor does it stop revolving without us. The reason many of us don't rest is because we think we're in more control than we are.
Right. That's true.
The reason you don't rest is because you think your family gonna fall apart if you take a vacation. Yeah. We don't rest because we think our business gonna close down if we don't show up. We don't rest because we think all the members gonna leave the church if we don't show up this Sunday. We don't rest because we think we're in control. And a Sabbath rest is a subtle reminder that you don't have the control you think you do. Let's go to Genesis because this is what Moses references for the Sabbath rest. I never noticed this until I was preparing for the sermon. He says, for 6 days, the Lord created. And on the 7th day, God rested. What happened on the 8th day? Light bulbs should be going off. God created 6 days. He rested the 7th day. Let's put this into perspective. God's hands created everything on day 1 and day 2 and day 3 and day 4 and day 5 and day 6. And then God lifted his hands and rested. And on day 8, the world was still there. Now, if God can take his hands off of the world for a day and the world still be there, why you can't take your hands off yours?
My God, come on, sir.
If God himself could pause from creation and the world still be there when God got back, then you can take a sick day, your company gonna still be there. You can take a vacation, them friends still gonna be there. You can sleep in this Sunday, the church still gonna be there.
Yes, sir.
Now just don't all sleep in at the same time. You would like to hear.
Amen.
But I promise you, the world is not gonna fall apart if you don't show up. I remember in my younger days, I think we were living in Churchland, and me and Mom had got a gym membership, this local gym not too far from where we were. And I hopped on this treadmill, and me being me, I just started pressing buttons, and I started running. And so, in me just pressing buttons and not really realizing how this treadmill works, I'm running, and I'm running, and I'm running, and you know, it catches up with me because I'm out of shape, and now I'm getting tired. Now, the problem is, I knew how to start it, but I didn't know how to stop it. And so I'm running, and I'm running, and I'm running. I'm getting tired, and I'm trying to figure it out, but I'm so busy running that I can't really focus on the buttons. And so I'm running, and I'm running, and I'm running, and I'm getting tired. I'm starting to get dizzy. I got to get up off this thing. And so I hop off the treadmill, and something amazing happened. The treadmill was still going. See, watch this. I wasn't making the treadmill work. The treadmill was making me work.
Come on, sir.
And some of you need to come to the realization that it don't work because of you. You're there to make it work. Or excuse me, it's working you. You're not working it.
Jesus.
And so you got to step off the treadmill. Because watch this. Even after I stepped off the treadmill, I was able to get back on it afterwards. It did not stop just because I hopped off. Again, your job's still going to be there. Listen, the word of the Lord for somebody is call out tomorrow. The word of the Lord for somebody is put some vacation time in this week. Because as Jesus said it himself, you were not made for the Sabbath was made for you. God was looking out for us when he made the Sabbath. We were not built to work. Listen, even going back to cell phones, every so often, I'll run into an issue with my phone that I can let it sit there and go into sleep mode, but even after I wake it up, it still got the issue. And in times like that, I have to power off my phone. There are some things that are only going to happen. There are some things that will only be resolved. There are some things that will only be fixed, not just by going to sleep, but literally resting. Going into a no power state. I dare you to take a day off and leave your phone somewhere. I thank God for deliverance. I remember I lost my phone one time and I almost lost my mind. The whole day I was trying to log into computers and see what emails came through. I was trying to link to my messaging app to find out what text messages I missed. I was hitting the little button to make my phone go off, hoping I'd hear somewhere. I almost lost my mind because I lost my phone. Which tells me I was not at rest. And here's the irony. Someone found my phone. Really, he stole it, but we're going to say he found it. Someone found my phone and he finally decided to answer my phone after I had been blowing it up all day, and I made arrangements to meet with him. I get my phone back and I ain't missed nothing. Wow. And God is trying to get some of us to realize that, listen, if you step away for one day, I promise you, you ain't going to miss nothing. And here's the thing. If you step away and everything falls apart, the problem's bigger than you anyway. We got to prioritize rest. Listen, I can go home, but since y'all still here, we're going to move on to the next point. The next thing we should prioritize is reverence. I'm about to get some amens for parents. Amen. We should prioritize reverence for parents. Why is this important? Verse 12 says, honor, respect, obey, care for your father and your mother. Some of y'all mothers should have got really excited. So that your days may be prolonged in the land the Lord your God gives you. We've misinterpreted this text. And what I mean by that is, what I always keep hearing people say is, honor your mother and father that your days will be long. Honor your mother and father that your days will be long. Honor your mother and father that your days will be long. And the problem is you're missing the actual point of that text. See, honoring our parents is not about reaching a certain age. It's about reaping a certain harvest. We think honoring our mother and father is about living long. And that's not what he says. He says, so that your days may be prolonged in the land the Lord your God gives you. So what he's saying is not that you'll live a long time. He's saying that you will enjoy the blessing longer. And so in essence, we've actually been cheating ourselves because we think we're going to get old because we took the trash out for mama, or we think we're going to get old because we took mama to Captain George's. And it's like, no, you might still die tomorrow, but it's not about how long I last. It's about how blessed I am. And so honoring our parents is not about reaching a certain age. It's about reaping a certain harvest. He says, honor, respect, obey, care for your father and your mother so that your days may be prolonged in the land the Lord your God gives you. And I would even argue that it's not even just limited to parents, but really it's about having reverence for your family. Because see, the parents are the foundation of the family. And so if I honor my parents, then it gives me honor for the family unit as a whole.
My God. Come on.
Thank you.
If you've had a loved one pass during this time, you understand how important family is now. See, there was a time when if a family member passed, I could at least go and say goodbye. But we're living in a time where if a family member dies right now, you might not, depending on how close you are, you might not make it to the funeral. You might have to watch it on Facebook, or you might have to tune in through teleconference. You won't be able to go say your last goodbye. And so he says, you need to reverence your family. You should honor your family, especially those who are the foundation of the family, your parents. Now, again, why is this important? If we don't learn, two reasons this is important. It shows our faithfulness and it secures our future. Why do we reverence our parents or our family? It shows our faithfulness and it secures our future. How does it show our faithfulness? It shows our faithfulness because if you don't treasure your roots, God can't trust you with his fruit. If you don't treasure your roots, God can't trust you with his fruit. God literally dropped that on me this morning. This was not originally a part of my sermon, but I'm laying in the bed this morning and I'm just still rehearsing over the sermon and going through the text and asking God questions. And he literally showed me a plant that had withered fruit. And I was like, God, why is the fruit withered? And he said, look at the roots. The roots were so badly damaged. The roots were in such poor condition that it began to affect the fruit. Now, some of you are saying, well, how do I honor a parent who's not honorable? There's no separation. God doesn't say, like your mother and father. He does not say, agree with your mother and father. He does not even say, love your mother and father. But he says, honor them. There's a level of honor that you bestow on them. Why? Because that's still your root. And the condition of the root will affect your fruit. Some of us are not enjoying the blessings of the Lord because we done forgot our roots. We have ignored our roots. We have not cared for our roots. We've, in some cases, walked away from our roots. And there's a direct correlation. I was literally asking God, like, what is it? How is it that if I honor my parents, I can enjoy the blessing longer? And he said, because you're taking care of the roots. I'm reminded of a story in the Bible, one that's very familiar to most of you. Noah has just survived the first annihilation of the earth. This man has heard the screams of people drowning. He has seen animals that were dying. And the only people that survive are him, his family, and two of every animal. He just came through that situation. The world has been destroyed. And he finally steps off. He finally comes out of quarantine, some might say. And he gets drunk. Now, it's easy to look at Noah and be like, Noah, you ought to be ashamed of yourself. But you ain't seen what Noah's seen. You have not survived what Noah has survived. And we see two sets of his sons. The first son comes in and sees his father on the ground, naked and drunk. And the Bible lets us know that he tries to exploit his father's nakedness. And two other sons come right behind him. And they see their father in the condition. And they turn their backs, not on their father, but they turn their back on his issue and go together to cover their father. Now, looking at that situation, you're asking, well, what's the difference between the sons? Here's the difference. One son saw his dad's failure. The other sons saw a damaged father. I'm going to say it again. The first sons saw their dad's failure. The other son saw a damaged father. In other words, they did not disconnect the fact of who he was. He may be drunk, but that's my daddy. He may be a deadbeat, but that's my daddy. He may not have done much for me, but that's my daddy. He might have missed all my games, but that's still my daddy. And I will not exploit his nakedness. I will not exploit his issues to make me feel good about myself. But watch this. I'll deal with my daddy issues on earth with my daddy in heaven, because my daddy in heaven can do for me what my daddy on earth can't do. I'll deal with my mommy issues with Papa in heaven, because Mama on earth can't do what he can.
Amen. Amen.
The son who exploits his father's nakedness is cursed. The two sons who cover their father's nakedness are blessed. When you don't value where you come from, you can't be victorious where you're going.
Wow.
Because he did not value the roots he came from enough, it made it difficult to go into what God would have him to go into. And this is why some folks are struggling. It seems like you got the right education, you've climbed up the ladder, you've gone through all the right doors, you've rubbed the right shoulders, and you're still not quite breaking through this glass ceiling. Maybe there's some dishonor somewhere. And until I value where I come from, I won't be victorious where I'm going. It shows God that you're faithful, that even though you may come from roots that aren't strong, you'll honor them. That even though you may come from damaged roots, You're honor them. I never looked at it this way, but many times we look at the family we come from and we say, God, why did you bring me through this family? This family has nothing to offer me. And God changed my perspective. Even if they don't have anything to offer you, you have something to offer them. Amen. And if we would change our perspective and not be so selfish, maybe God did not put you there to get from them. But maybe God put so much inside of you that you were going to be the branch on your family tree that would bear new fruit because you're not going to dishonor the tree you come from. It shows my faithfulness, but not only that, it secures my future, which brings me to my next thought. If we don't learn from the failures of those who preceded us, we won't last in the future God has provided for us. I'm going to say that again. If we don't learn from the failures of those who preceded us, we won't last in the future God has provided for us. Another reason it's important that they honor their mother and father is to learn from them. What's interesting is, again, God gives this commandment twice. But if you do the research, you realize that he gives the commandments to two different audiences. The first set are actually the parents. The next set, the group that actually goes into the promised land, are the children. None of the first group live or survive the wilderness to actually go to the promise that God had for them. Because they did not learn the lesson from the previous generation. And so this next generation goes in and he gives them the same warning. He says, listen, none of your parents are making it into the promise. So make it a priority to still honor them. In other words, be willing to, as the text says, obey. Be willing to learn. Be willing to piece together their mistakes. Because what happens is we find ourselves in new success, but we still have old issues. And we stifle the success with the old issues because we either didn't listen or we did not learn. Mama warned me about a whole bunch of stuff that I didn't hit my head for no reason on. And in doing so, there's a good chance that I may have limited my success because now I had to waste time dealing with the mistake that my mom already made and tried to warn me about. And not only that, I bless God, even though my father was not there with me, there are certain levels of success that I have attained, not because of something he told me, but from something that I learned from watching his life. And because I didn't make similar mistakes, because I didn't put myself in similar situations, God has allowed me to excel in certain areas that my father did not. And so I can't dishonor him because even in that space, he was teaching me what not to do.
Yes.
Yes.
So I honor my roots to secure my fruit. We should prioritize reverence for parents. We should prioritize our family because even if they're not perfect, neither are we. Point number 3. We should prioritize respect for life. And this is a big one. We should prioritize respect for life. The Bible says it this way: you shall not commit murder, unjustified, deliberate homicide. Now, some of y'all just wipe the sweat off your forehead because you're like, I ain't never killed nobody. This is a commandment that I can live with. I can check this one off. I hit this box. I know I ain't killed nobody. And if I did, you ain't got evidence. I'm good on this one. I'm good. But I'd like to argue that maybe you aren't. Maybe you're not as good as you think you are. What's interesting about all 3 of these commandments is that the punishment for all 3 of these commandments are the same. If you don't rest on the Sabbath, you get caught working, you get stoned to death. Not only that, if you dishonor your mother and father, you get stoned to death. And if you murder somebody, you get stoned to death. These are heavy. These are very heavy ones right here. These 3 are very heavy. Now, I'm going to ask the obvious question. Why should we not murder one another? Now, again, some of you saying, I ain't never murdered nobody. But I'm going to argue otherwise. Why should we not murder one another? Write this down. Because of the fragility of life, I'm going to help some of y'all out, Fargility, and the irreversibility of murder, Irreversibility. The fragility of life and the irreversibility of murder. The fragility of life and the irreversibility of murder. The first reason we should not murder one another is because life is fragile. Life is fragile. How many of you have ever seen a box that says fragile, handle with care? Mm-hmm. And normally it has a picture of like a glass being shattered on it. Like a chunk of the glass has been taken out. It says fragile, handle with care. Life is fragile. And here's the thing. If I mishandle something that's fragile, it's possible for me to put it back together, but it might never be the same again. Mm-hmm. Now, what does this have to do with us murdering people? Jesus says something. He's teaching, I want to say it's Sermon on the Mount, Matthew chapter 5. I want to say verse 22. He says something. He says, you've heard it said that you shall not murder. He's referencing the Ten Commandments. And he says, but I say to you, this is Jesus talking, this is red letter, but I say to you, if you say raka to your neighbor, you'll be in danger of prison time. And if you call your brother a fool, you'll be in danger of hellfire. What does this all have to do with each other? It's possible to murder somebody without a machete. What he's suggesting is that you can murder somebody with your mouth. And the Bible backs Jesus up. It says death and life is in the power of tongue. Now, we like to quote life and death is in the power of tongue. But no, it's actually given as a warning. It's death and life is in the power of tongue. Look at it in its translation. It literally says death and life. It starts by warning you that you can kill people with conversation. That you can murder people with your mouth. Which brings me to my next thought. Every day, there are murderers who are never arrested, charged, nor tried because the murder weapon is in their mouth and the murder victims are still moving. I'm going to read that again. Every day, there are murderers who are never arrested, charged, nor tried because the murder weapon is in their mouth and the murder victims are still moving. I got to unpack that real quick. Going back to the fragility of life, we're fragile. We're fragile beings. It really doesn't take much to break us. And even though I may not murder you with a machete, I can kill you through conversation. I can literally say something to you. Now let's put this in perspective. Jesus says, if you call your brother a fool, you're in danger of hellfire. I know everybody in this room may call something way worse than a fool.
Yes, sir.
It does something to us because the word is true. Death and life is in the power of the tongue. And so what you call me, you can literally kill my call. That's good right there. Yeah. You can kill my call by what you call me. And this is why I get stressed out when I'm in the store and I hear these mothers whooping up on their kids. And don't get me wrong, ain't nothing wrong with tapping them on the butt, but it's how you're killing them in their mind. When you're telling them they're stupid, when you're telling them they're retarded, when you're telling them they're like they're no good daddy or they're no good mama, you're not just disciplining them, but you're damaging them. Yes. You're killing them with conversation. Yes, ma'am. Thank you, Jesus. He says, if you call your brother a fool, you're in danger of hellfire. Now, we chuckled when I said we've been called worse, but how many of us have called worse? Yes, Lord. Yes, Lord. And maybe we aren't all as innocent of murder as we think. Fragility of life. Fragility of life. Fragility of life. It doesn't take much to break a person. What if something you said affected somebody in a way that they've never been the same? That's true. That's true. How many men never became the men God would have them to be because of what they were called? How many women fell short of the woman God created them to be because of what they were called? How many boys and girls are confused right now because of what they were called? Or in some cases, because of what they were not called. Because it's not just death in the power of the tongue, but also life. We're fragile. And it doesn't take much to break us. And this is why we have to be careful in conversation. The Bible says we will give an account for every idle word we speak. We were just joking in conversation, but who did you kill? Oh, I was just making light, but who did you kill? I was watching an episode of Walker, Texas Ranger. Don't ask me why. I really don't know why I was watching that show. But I was TV surfing, and Walker, Texas Ranger, Chuck Norris, some of y'all know him. It was a weird episode. The time I turned to it, and this was maybe 2-3 weeks ago, the time I turned to it, I saw him walking towards the building, and he heard some people screaming. And so he goes over to find out what's going on, and he looks up, and there's a little boy standing on top of the school. Mama Nine, she must have seen that episode. And the little boy was threatening that he was going to jump. And so Chuck Norris says, listen, you keep talking to him, I'm going to go up there, and I'm going to try to bring him down. And so Chuck Norris runs up, I don't know how many flights of stairs. TV magic is real, because I would have been tired. But he gets to the roof in the nick of time, and he catches his little boy. He's about to step off, and he tries to talk to him. He tries to talk to the little boy, and he tries to bring him off the ledge, and he says, there's no point, no one cares for me. And he's like, I care for you, and you have so many reasons to live. And the little boy's like, no, I don't. They keep picking with me. And he was like, well, hey, we can deal with the people that are picking with you. And the little boy looks back, and my heart kind of got excited, because I'm like, yes. Because now the children sucked me in. And I'm like, he's going to come to Chuck Norris, and Chuck Norris is going to hug him, and they're going to celebrate, and they're going to find out who's been bullying this little boy, and they're going to be reprimanded. And the little boy looks back, and all of a sudden you see him going over. I wasn't ready for that one. I'm going to be honest. I wasn't ready. Now, they didn't show it. It wasn't all graphic. This was the 90s. But next scene, you see him laying on the concrete. And I pondered that thing. I pondered that thing. I'm sitting there, and God brought it back to my remembrance for the sermon. I'm like, well, God, what are you saying? And literally, what I heard in my spirit was, he was already dead. That was just an external manifestation of his inward experience. The bullies killed him a long time ago.
So sad.
His reality was just catching up to the damage that has been done. And some of us don't have the husbands that we desire because you killed him a long time ago. We don't have the wives we desire because you killed them a long time ago. Our children are not reaching their full potential because you killed them a long time ago. The pastor's struggling to keep the ministry afloat because you killed them a long time ago. The saints are struggling to stay in the seats because the pastor killed them a long time ago. Death and life is in the power of the tongue. And here's the thing. They may never be the same again. But you don't know because they're the walking dead. They're walking around, but they're dead. From a conversation you had. And if some of us will be honest, we've been walking around dead because of conversations that have been had around us or about us. And we're struggling to get or become who God has called us to be because we're walking dead. We don't even realize we're dead. And so we have to prioritize a respect for life. I'm not going to talk about your situation like that because I don't want to kill you. Listen, don't put your mouth on anything you're not willing to make a difference about. Don't just have casual conversation with me about somebody's downfall. He steps off the building. But it never was him stepping off the building. The little boy inside of him died a long time ago. What was stepping off that building was merely a shell of who he used to be. And today I'm going to pull somebody from the edge and tell you not to jump. To tell you not to step off. Because there is good news that we have, and this is my last point. We can do these three things because we have a Redeemer. We have a Redeemer. We need Jesus because he makes rest possible. Some of you saying, Pastor Mike, that sounds good, and I try to get to bed and get at least 8 hours of sleep a day. No. See, you're resting your body, but your soul needs a rest.
Yes.
Jesus says, come unto me, all ye that labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon me and learn of me, for my yoke is easy and my burden is light. And some of you have been carrying heavy burdens for so long that you can't sleep. You're like my wife's iPhone. You're just in between interruptions. Because some of you place your value in your busyness. You place your value in being needed because at one point in your life you weren't wanted. And so you grab bags to feel special, and it's killing you. See, the irony of not taking a Sabbath rest and being stoned to death is they were simply speeding up the process. Eventually it was going to kill you not resting, but we might as well just go ahead and kill the legwork. Is essentially what's happening in the Old Testament. If you're not going to rest, you're going to work yourself into an early grave, and so we'll just throw some stones and put you out your misery. We need rest. We need rest, and this rest only comes in Him. If you would rest in Jesus, you would sleep much better at night. If you would rest in Jesus, if you would, I love how Jesus says, except you come as a little child. And I can't help but think of a song that I learned as a little child. He's got the whole world in his hands. 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 I can rest at night because I know the whole world ain't in my hands. Amen. That my world is in the hands of someone that can handle it. And because he can handle it, I can step off this treadmill and know that when I come back to it tomorrow, it'll still be there. We can rest in him. Amen. We need Jesus because he makes reconciliation possible. He makes reconciliation possible. Listen, your family may be ratchet. And that's just the family God put you in.
Yes, Lord.
But think about a perfect Jesus submitting himself to an imperfect family.
Yes.
Jesus is perfect. And as perfect as we like to make Mary, she won't. As perfect as we like to make Joseph, he won't. In fact, he almost bounced on Mary. No grace. He's like, you take me tomorrow. Devil is a lie. But here we have this perfect Jesus submitting himself to an imperfect family to give us an example that, watch this, they may not have anything to offer you, but maybe I've put so much in you that you have something to offer them. They couldn't save Jesus, but Jesus could save them. Yes. Your family could not save you, but maybe the goal was for you to save your family. Amen. And if we would change our perspective and stop seeing drunk failures and instead see damaged fathers,
my God,
we wouldn't have dishonor on our lips for the roots God gave us. Reconciliation is possible through Christ because the Bible lets us know he came back to turn the hearts of the sons to the fathers and the hearts of the fathers to the sons. And so our prayer has to be, Jesus, listen, you know it's a hard thing. Jesus, you know what this family put me through. Jesus, you know what they did to me. Jesus, you know what they're holding over my head. Jesus, you know what they said about me. Jesus, you know the obstacles they put in front of me. Jesus, you know how they used me. Jesus, you know how they abused me. But if you could reconcile the whole world back to you, then God, I know you can reconcile me with my family.
Yes.
Amen. And lastly, we need Jesus because he makes resurrection possible. He makes resurrection possible. Some of us have killed people through conversation, and they have never been the same. And in some cases, some of us have been killed by conversation, and we've never been the same. But I've got good news today. That Jesus the Christ, Jesus who was stretched wide on the cross, Jesus who gave his spirit up to God. Jesus, who said, forgive them for they know not what they do. That Jesus, the Bible lets us know that his death, burial, and resurrection was so powerful that before he even got put into the tomb, the Bible says that an earthquake shook the earth, and watch this, it opened up the graves. See, we like to get the Easter Sunday, the resurrection, but the Bible lets us know resurrection took place before Resurrection Sunday. That he, even in that point, that when he gave up the ghost, he was already opening the graves of those who would walk out. And the good news today is that Jesus has opened up your grave, that you don't have to lay where they left you, that you can get up, that you are not what they said you would be, that you will not grow up to be that, that thing will not toil and torture you for the rest of your life, that you are greater. Jesus gives the possibility of an empty tomb. That the tomb they placed you in does not have to be the tomb you stay in.
Amen.
My God.
And I want to challenge you to get up out of the tomb today. To not stay where they left you. Why? Because resurrection is possible. To that husband that's been broken by the words of his wife, I say live. To that wife who's been broken by the words of her husband, I say live. To that baby mama, baby daddy who've been damaged, broken by the words of their significant other, I say live. To that child who was told he would never go past his father or mother's ceiling, I say live. You may be fragile, but you are fixable. And in Christ, I love the fact that Jesus was a carpenter. He did not just fix things, but he was in the business of fixing people. There is resurrection possibility in Christ.